Imagine this, a brand new project lands on your desk. Ship an AI-powered customer support agent. The requirements are stacked, the timeline is tight, and expectations are high. It needs to understand voice when a customer calls in. It needs to search your policy docs so that answers are actually grounded in your business. And it needs to call your internal APIs to do real work, open a ticket, update an account. So where do you even start? Which Foundry resources fit the timeline without blowing the budget? How do you keep that agent grounded, governed, and safe every step of the way? And how do you ship it without hand-waving all the hard parts? That's the reality most teams are walking into right now, and it's exactly what this course is built for. Welcome to AI-103. Develop AI apps and agents on Azure. Hi, I'm Rob Fulkrod, a lead technical trainer here at Microsoft. I've been a Microsoft certified trainer since '99, and I've spent my career helping professionals ship real solutions across developer tools, DevOps, data, and now AI. Across this course, I'm going to walk you through the same path I'd walk a customer through if they handed me this customer support agent project on a Monday morning. We'll move from the foundations all the way to production-ready agents on Microsoft Foundry. Here's how the course is laid out. 4 topics building on each other. In topic 1, we'll learn Foundry's platform, design chat experiences, call tools to form responses, and ground answers in your own data, and apply responsible AI from day 1. In topic 2, we'll move from apps that respond to agents that act, building Foundry agents, extending the grounding with them with tools, and orchestrating multi-agent solutions. In topic 3, we'll give those agents a voice and a vocabulary. The language and speech services, multimodal audio and chat, real-time conversations, voice live, and translation across languages. And finally, apps that will reason over visual data, generate image and video content, understand multimedia documents with content understanding, and index everything with Azure AI Search. By the end of this course, that agent won't feel intimidating. So let's get started. Every AI agent you've ever interacted with starts the same way underneath, with a generative AI app calling a model, shaping a prompt, and grounding the answers in real data. So before we get into agents that act, we need to be fluent in the apps that respond. That fluency is the runway for everything that follows in this course. Before you write a single line of code, the decisions you make in the planning phase shape everything. Which platform you build on, which models you can reach, which tools your team uses, and how responsibly your solution behaves once it's in front of real users. Getting that foundation right is what makes the rest of the work easier. We'll start with what AI actually is in this context and explore Microsoft Foundry and the Microsoft Foundry tools you build with it. From there, we'll look at the developer tools and SDK available to you, and we'll wrap responsible AI principles that'll guide everything in this project. In this session, we're going to ground ourselves with what AI is on this platform. We'll explore Microsoft Foundry and the Foundry tools, and we'll walk you through the SDK and grounding our thinking in responsible AI. This course is going to be really focused on this idea of Microsoft Foundry. And so the first thing that we're going to have to do is start to look at what Foundry is and what the components are that we're going to find inside of Foundry. So Foundry itself is going to be, as you can see right here, is this unified platform. It's a single spot where you can go to build the agents that you're going to need. Those agents are going to be reliant on a number of different models. So we'll have an opportunity to preview and select a huge number of models. The model alone is the brain of the whole thing, but it's going to need arms and legs. And those arms and legs are going to come from various tools. And we've got a number of options available to us. We have kind of our tooling in terms of being able to reach out to external resources. We'll see things like MCP a little bit later. But there's also a collection of AI tools that we've had for quite some time that'll be available to us. Those will be in here as well. More on those in a minute. But the last thing, models have a finite amount of information. They've been trained on public information, and that public information has a cutoff of potentially a couple of years ago. So if we need private information, we need your policies, we need your inventories, we need those tools. Those models are also going to need to have access to various knowledge. So those tools as well are going to be set up, configured, and accessible inside of your project, right? So what we're going to build is a Foundry project. When we go to build the project, it will, beneath the covers, build the resource for us. So in essence, the resource comes first. It's the landing place. This is where your network resources are, the compute resources, that's really the platform in which we will put our project. Then the project is going to contain potentially multiple models, multiple agents, multiple tools, and knowledge, right? Now, before there was Foundry, and before generative AI, there were a number of AI tools inside of Azure. These tools have gone by a number of different names over time. They have been called cognitive services. They have been called Azure AI services. And they're still relevant today, right? Now, a number of generative AI solutions have maybe eaten away at some of the functionality that we saw in the original classification of tools, but there's still a number of tools that are still very valuable today. And we'll be looking at those tools throughout the course, primarily in sections 3 and 4 of this course, but here we want to know where we can find them when we get our hands on them. The tools that we have available here are going to be things like the Azure language in Foundry tools. That's our natural language processing. This is things like, hey, can we detect the language that we're running on? Can we find key terms or entities in that text? Can we do things like lay the groundwork for translation? We've also got capabilities in here for speech. Now, there's a number of generative AI solutions that have speech as a capability. However, picking that model is more complicated than just, I need speech. So there will be times where you're picking a tiny little model that's really good at one thing, yet the agent still needs maybe to be able to understand speech or to respond in kind. So we've got these tools that we can kind of bolt on top of those additional models. So speech and translation are in there. The idea of document intelligence, to be able to read from PDFs and forms and invoices and receipts and extract that information. And multi-model understanding. So we can look at those documents and say, okay, I know what's on that thing. I can describe what's on that document. These are all some of the Foundry tools that we'll be working with over the course. So let's walk into a quick demo so that we can get a feel for the environment. All right, so this is going to be a quick dry run to make sure that everything is going well. So everyone, we are going to be taking a look at Foundry here. We'll look at it in a couple of different views. First, we'll take a look at the web UI, where we will create a project and we'll create a model. Then we will get into what it looks like inside of Visual Studio Code, specifically the extensions that are inside of code. We won't write any code in this section, but we will get to that very, very soon. So for starters, we are going to navigate to Foundry. Foundry, you can see right here, ai.azure.com is where we're going. There's a couple of different Foundry UIs right now. The next gen here is the new UI that we're going to be looking to. You can see a little switch right there where you can turn it on or off. And we will first start by looking at creating a project. Now, I've got a few projects here already, but we will go ahead and, through the little project section right here, go ahead and create a brand new project. And from there, it'll give us a suggestion. It'll always be our username, typically as a suggestion, and some random number. My username right now is demo, so we'll grab that. And then specifically, the resource. So we talked about earlier that we have a resource, which is kind of the bucket that holds all of the components for a particular collection of applications, and then one or more projects inside of that resource. So this is the child inside of our resource. We'll specify where we want that to go. Right now, we will pick East US 2, which is fine. We will drop it into a brand new resource group. And then we will go ahead and click Create. That'll take just a couple of moments to build. And a couple of minutes later, we now have a project. So let's go. It then should open up to our new project. You can see right here, our demo 0687. We'll use this one today. In maybe later sections, we'll switch up. Next is, what does this look like from inside of some of our tools? So I'm going to swing into Visual Studio Code here. I've got that open, kind of an empty project at this point. It is empty, right? Yeah. And we're going to take a look at the extensions necessary for our app. We're swinging to our extensions, and we're going to look for our Foundry extensions. You're going to see there's really two of them available to us. There is the AI toolkit and the Foundry. As of right now, we're kind of in a little place of flux where we have the two of these. Later on, we will see probably just the one Foundry toolkit. So I still install this one. It will install both for us. Only take a moment to do so. All right. And now that it's installed, we see the two of these down here. The first being the first at the bottom here, being the Foundry, and then the toolkit where we're going to spend most of our time. All right, so there we've gone through kind of the demo that I need to see. Hope that was helpful, and let's wrap all this up in a sec. Now that we've seen our way around, let's take a look at the ways that we're going to be interacting with Foundry when we're not in the Foundry portal itself. And so we've got a lot of tools, really, that are available. On the slide here, we're talking about one in particular. We'll be talking about Visual Studio Code. That'll be our primary vessel that we'll be using throughout the entire course. However, whatever your favorite IDE is, editor, they're all fine. We'll look at Visual Studio Code. We will look at the toolkit extension as a way of interacting with Foundry when we don't have the Foundry portal open. And of course, GitHub Copilot. When we install the toolkit, there's a number of skills that are pre-built in there that are going to help you write your code faster. Okay. And then there's a matter of the SDK. You can interact with these models by way of REST API, right? It's ubiquitous. You can use it anywhere, but REST is a little bit clunky for us on the developer side to be using on the regular. So often we will have that SDK layer that wraps over the top of it. So we have a couple of options, and we will explore what those options are in later sections. But here we just want to introduce that we do have things like the OpenAI SDK, which are typically used for talking directly to models, right? When we want to start a chat with that model, get a response back, the OpenAI SDK is perfectly fine, right? But as we start to layer over the top of that, when we want to have not just a chat with a model, but have a full agentic platform, well, that's when the Microsoft Foundry SDK comes in handy. It can shorten the development time when we need to start including things like additional tools, and grounding can sometimes be a little bit easier with the Foundry SDK. So you can imagine that if you're targeting the model directly, maybe the OpenAI SDK works, but if you're working at a higher level, often we'll jump into the Foundry platform. And then we just talked about the other Foundry tools that were available to us, language and speech and translator. Each of those have their own SDK, right? And so we can use those directly, or we'll see there are some tools that allow us to work with them from inside the agentic structure. And finally, there's this idea of responsible AI. There's 6 principles that Microsoft developed and refined over the years. The principles of fairness, reliability, and safety. privacy and security, inclusiveness, transparency, and accountability. Each one of these are structural points that we need tools for all throughout the platform. So we will see throughout the course where we can plug in each of these components, right? Whether we're looking at our choice of data grounding, whether we're looking at refining our prompts, whether we're looking at building guardrails or UX or ongoing operations, those are all components that we're going to be seeing throughout the course to reinforce these ideas. If you want to give a shot, there is an exercise in here to walk through the Foundry project, to go ahead and build and test a generative AI model, and to make sure that we're comfortable with the various endpoints and working inside of Visual Studio Code. This one is a good one if you are brand new to Foundry and you want to get those tools ready for the rest of the course. If you've done this a little bit, you're going to do this for each of the sections coming up, so it's an okay one if you're a little pressed for time to skip over. All right, folks, so let's explore Foundry a little bit. We're going to spend a lot of time there over the next few sessions. So I'm going to start by going to ai.azure.com. ai.azure.com is going to be the portal that we're going to be in quite a bit. And when we go there first, the first thing you're going to notice, and I want to make sure that you're really clear here, because we've got a couple different portals. And so you can see here that I've got this little toggle up at the top for the new Foundry. And that's what we want to be in. We want to make sure that every time you're doing any of the examples, anything that we're seeing through the course, that you're in that new Foundry. Now, when I do this, I'm immediately going to be asked for a project. So in the idea of this new portal, there's always a default project. And so it asks me now, what's the default project? And it shows me all the projects that I have, of which there are none at this point. So we're going to have to build a project. So I'll create here, create new project, go to give it a name. This number could be whatever. And we'll go into advanced options here, and you can see what you're deciding. So we're deciding on two things. Number one is the Foundry resource, and the Foundry resource is just going to take whatever the name is with the word resource at the end. You're also picking a region, and we haven't talked about this a lot yet. In future sessions, when we start talking about later in the session, we haven't talked about this a lot yet, but later in the session, when we start taking a look at, no, it's next session. Try again, sorry. We haven't talked about this a lot yet, but in the next session, when we start talking about regional deployments, it's important to know that whatever we pick right now, this is the region where your models will be deployed. If you pick the wrong region, it's not really a big deal. We just deploy another project. But if you are considering, and we'll talk about them in a little detail later, regional deployments, this is a big decision. Here, East US 2 is going to be fine for me. That's a fine description or subscription. And a new resource group is going to be fine. So I'll click Create here, and it'll take just another minute or so to go and build. All right, and so now we are seeing it has completed building the Foundry. We get a nice little introduction page here. I'll do the introduction, so I won't worry so much about this page. And what we have in front of us here is the new Foundry. And the new Foundry has a series of tabs across the top for the different portions of kind of the life cycle that you're going to be working through. And what we're on right now is Home. And Home, while not incredibly interesting, you will spend some time here just snagging these endpoints. We'll need these on a consistent basis. So it's convenient. You just click Home, and boom, you can grab these endpoints at any point in time. Not much else on this home page. We can see kind of some news sections on here, and then a quick start code. We'll take a look at that and a couple other links. But generally speaking, the only thing you're doing here on home is grabbing these endpoints. But then we have Discover and build. So discover is the area where you can search for new things, and then build once you have deployed them. This is where you're going to be able to work with them. So in the discover, we will see that we have then a panel down the side, and this will be pretty common as well. The items here on this panel are going to change depending upon which of those tabs we're on, whether it's home, build, work. So home. The panel will change depending upon which of those tabs that we're on, whether it is home, discover, build, etc. But here in Discover, we have an overview, and it's just saying, hey, here are some of the models that are possible, very similar to that if we were to grab models. The next section, we will spend a bunch of time trying to decide which of these models to deploy. I'm just going to grab one really quickly here. So I'm going to search for our GPT 4.1, click on it. Again, we'll spend more time later trying to figure out which models to deploy, but I'm just going to grab this one right here, quick deploy. We'll use the default settings. And instantly, we are now on the build. You can see the little bolding right there. We're on the build tab, right? Let's go back to Discover for just a second, just to see some of the other things that we could take a look at. This is all exploration and kind of planning of what you're going to be building. So here inside of agents, there are a few templates that you could pick from, right? We're not going to spend a bunch of time here in this course talking about these, but I do suggest that you dig down into those and take a look at some of those starter templates. They're a really good spot for jumping off for new code. We'll talk in depth about a bunch of tools. If you just want to scan those tools up front, we've got that available. And end-to-end templates are available here as well. So again, we won't spend a lot of time here in the course going forward. But I think you should when you're popping into the Foundry. All right, so that's our Discover side of things. Let's swing into Build. And over here in Build, really kind of the head of all of this is agents. That's really the next topic over, so we're not going to spend a bunch of time there. But we can then see here the models that we've deployed. And you saw just a second ago, I deployed GPT 4.1, so we've got a version of that available to us. And from here, we could then go and work on that model in the playground and kind of test it all out. So we can see here, we will spend a lot of time building instructions. What can you do? And a almost non-instruction model here. We say, well, I don't know, I can do lots of stuff. I am a large language model. Here are some ideas. All right. Other things that we're going to be looking at as we go. We will spend some time taking a look at fine-tuning. So once you've deployed a model, you may find that it's not exactly what you want from that model, that you might want to change its behavior a little bit. We can go through a fine-tuning process. We will see that. Models are only as good as the tools and the knowledge that they have. So before we go to add those into our agents, we'll often spend time going ahead and building those tools or adding that knowledge. In a little bit, we will start talking about things like the 6 principles of responsible AI. We will start to see things like guardrails and evaluations as being part of that effort. And so build is the spot where we're going to spend a lot of time here creating our resources. Where we won't spend as much time is on the operate side of things, but it's still important, right? That the Foundry is giving us this overview so that we can see all things that are associated with our models and our agents. So over here in the assets side of things, we would see all of our agents, all of the models that we've been deploying across projects. All of the tools that we've deployed are all here. When we're looking at things like compliance, this is a one-stop shop here for our policies, guardrails, security posture, security and governance. You will note, and we haven't talked about it a lot, but you will note when you go to deploy models, there you can only have so much throughput per model type. So this allows you to see across projects how many models you've deployed and how much of your allocation have you deployed of them. And then finally, on the admin side of things, we will see all of the projects that we have available to us. Right? So that's the operate, then off to docs. Okay. Now, one thing that we did talk about earlier, if we swing over here into build, and we look at our models, we have a section in here called AI services. And this AI services, this is that tools section that we talked about earlier, that we're going to have generative AI models. We're also going to have those purpose-built machine learning models that can do things like voice live and speak to text. In topics 3 and 4, we will spend a lot of time with those, but know that when you deploy a single project, you're already ready to go. You don't have to do a secondary deployment or bring those, they're all here and ready to go. All right, so we've got a lot more to do. So let's go back to the deck and finish this up. All right, let's see how we did. Which web portal should you use to work with assets in a Microsoft Foundry project? In this case, we're looking at the Microsoft Foundry portal, and we spent a little bit of time in there earlier. Okay. Which component of Microsoft Foundry provides pre-built services for common AI tasks? That is indeed the Foundry tools, those additional tools that help supplement large language models. Which extension should you use in Visual Studio Code to work with Foundry projects? And here, if you're using Visual Studio Code, the recommendation is the Microsoft AI Toolkit. So here, we laid the groundwork for everything that's going to be following in this course. We took a look at the Foundry projects and the creation there of projects. They are the ones that are going to hold the models and the agents and the tools and the knowledge that we're going to be building on top of for the next 20-some sessions. Included in there are a bunch of built-in tools, language and speech, vision, document understanding, to supplement what some of our generative AI solutions are capable of. Visual Studio Code is going to be our primary tool in this course, using the toolkit and the Foundry, and then we're going to have a series of SDKs, both the Foundry and the OpenAI SDK in this topic. We'll go a little bit further in the next one. And 6 responsible AI principles are going to guide us along the way. We'll spend some time as we tick off those requirements along the course. In this section, we just started. We grounded ourselves in what AI is on this platform, explored Microsoft Foundry and the Foundry tools, and walked through the developer tools and SDKs that we're going to be using, and grounded our thinking in responsible AI. Thank you for participating in this Develop AI Apps and Agents on Azure course. I hope you enjoyed learning about planning AI solutions on the Microsoft Foundry platform as much as I enjoyed presenting them. I encourage you to remain curious and continue exploring new capabilities. That's how we're going to stay relevant in this fast-moving world. There are many ways to continue your learning, and I invite you to search for your next favorite topic on Microsoft Learn at aka.ms/learn.